Hello, cosmonauts. Today, we are going to be exploring what Reddit asks. What's a family secret that was revealed by a family DNA history website? Answer 1. This past year, my family found out that we are 47, 49, 51, and 53 old, have an older sister. Turns out my mother, died back in 2008, was raped by her high school boyfriend in the late 50s. When she found out she was pregnant, she told him. He denied it was his, called her a whore. Then his family sent him to live on the East Coast to get away from it. My 18-year-old mom traveled by bus to another state, stayed with an aunt for a year, had the baby there, gave it up for adoption, then traveled back home. Her entire life we had no idea. My grandparents, her mom and dad, and my father knew. They kept the secret. My sister took a DNA test. This lady contacted her that they had a DNA match through my mother. That was last July. Since then, my sister and I have met her, and we absolutely love her. She looks exactly like our mom, even has similar mannerisms. It's crazy, lol. My dad absolutely adores her, and last month he met her for the very first time. They talk on the phone every day now. He is 90 years old and was really deteriorating. Having her come into our lives has completely rejuvenated him. I haven't seen him this happy in years. And BTW, she's wonderful, which is awesome, because my brother is an a-hole, so I traded him for a new older sister. Answer 2. A family member had murdered someone in the 70s and left behind some DNA. They were able to link him to the crime a few years ago because someone somewhere in the extended family had done one of those tests. He pled guilty and died in prison. Answer 3. My paternal grandmother's family. The story my dad has been fed his whole life is that his parents divorced when he was young, and his dad took the two boys before family courts were really a thing. He knew he had a half-sister who would call the house occasionally, and he refused to talk to her. Turns out my grandmother more than likely was put into witness protection, and no one heard from her since 1970. I met several of my second cousins through Ancestry, though I still haven't found my dad's living half-sister, even though I'd love to connect. Aunt Diane, if you're out there, I'm ready to talk. Answer 4. Ooh, similar but different continent. My grandma goes hard on the Irish-American stuff and has my whole life. My mom, GMA's DEL, is really into Ancestry and learned that my dad's family is not a bit Irish. On both sides, I am very German and old colonial stock American. So, English, Scottish, Welsh, but not Irish. But grandma was born in 33 and somewhere around 39, a lot of German heritage people started magically becoming Irish. My great-grandmother spoke fluent German but was Irish, according to grandma. I do wish we'd had schnitzel and spatzel instead of corned beef and cabbage, but kimchi is a pretty good bonus false heritage food. Answer 5. My dead dropkick uncle had a secret child that not even his ex-wife knew about. Found out last year when my younger cousin did a DNA test, and she reached out. She was adopted as a baby and always wanted a big family. Wish granted, I guess, because my family is huge and she's invited to all the holidays now. Someone answer. He opposite for me. My very awesome uncle had a kid he didn't know about. Some 16 years prior to find out, which was a long time ago now. He was seeing a girl and his parents disagreed with him seeing her, so gave him an ultimatum about leaving her or leaving their house. He was a teen at the time, so did as his parents asked, but it turned out the girl later found out she was pregnant and just didn't tell him. 16 years later, a knock at the door and it's a teenager girl saying, "I think you're my dad." DNA test done and turns out it was all true. They instantly had an amazing relationship and she later went off to university here in the UK. To my knowledge, they still are on great terms and the entire family Answer 6. I don't know if it's exactly a family secret, but the cold case of missing 9-year-old Asha Degree. Almost exactly 25 years ago, she seems to have packed her backpack, left her house at 3:30 a.m., walked along the road where she was spotted by a couple of people, then disappeared. Very few clues were found, other than when a construction crew dug up her backpack about 1.5 years after her disappearance. The backpack was sealed in 2 garbage bags and buried over 35 miles away from her house. The case was recently reopened and a reinvestigation was started. Remember her backpack that was dug up over 23 years ago? They went back and tested the items inside, leading them to a familial DNA link to a completely random family in the area. They served a search warrant in September 2024 and just executed another search warrant last week. They found a car that resembles one that witnesses claimed Asha was pushed into during the reinvestigation. Authorities seem to think 2 sisters, who were 15 and 16 at the time, may have caused Asha's death, possibly accidentally, and their father helped them cover up. Text messages were uncovered in the search that are troubling at the very least. A case that was completely cold now seems to be red hot. because a cousin uploaded their DNA to a public website, and one of the sisters supposedly drunkenly admitted to killing Asha at a party just a few years after it happened. Probably a little awkward at the reunion, but cheers to the hope of justice being served for Asha and her family. Hey you, if you enjoying the video, subscribe for more histories. Answer 7. I did one on Ancestry about 10 years ago. I found a first cousin who I didn't recognize. I asked my mom about it, and a few hours later she called me and explained I was donor conceived. Sperm donor. So my dad who raised me isn't my biological father. It hasn't changed my relationship with my parents at all. I didn't feel any different than I did before I knew. If anything, it made me feel a bit more special. I reached out to the half-sibling, who had appeared as a first cousin, as the rough percent of shared DNA is the same for both. But he never replied. I expect I have other half-siblings out there, so it will be interesting to see if any pop up on Ancestry in the future. Answer 8. My grandfather matched with his first grandson that was adopted when my aunt was 15. He was born in Nevada, adopted in Arizona, and was raised in Utah, where my aunt happened to live in the same zip code for the last 25 years. He met his 32 cousins, his grandparents, aunts and uncles, parents, an entire extended family. He lives within a 20-minute drive of 90% of us. I just went to their baby shower, and it's been amazing to see that sometimes you have an entire family of well-adjusted, loving people waiting to meet and know you. I have a lot of friends who met their adoptive parents, and it didn't turn out so great. Answer 9. My best friend from high school was adopted. Her parents were really good parents, but she still was excited to turn 18 and be able to find her bio parents. When we were 20, she finally found them and bought a place ticket to go meet them at their home outside of Las Vegas. When she arrived, she found that they lived in a nice house in the desert, had 9 children, and that she was the 5th child to be born and the only one put up for adoption. The next child they had after her was only 10 months younger than her. When she asked why she was the one they put up for adoption, her bio mom said, "I just wasn't really sure that I wanted more kids at the time." And that once she got pregnant with the next baby, she decided she did, but didn't want 2 that close in age, so off the one she'd just birthed went. Basically, she was absolutely just not wanted and discarded. That was almost 25 years ago, and was the only time she ever had contact with them. She went home and told her mom, and her mom just said, "Well, we must have wished for you so hard that you were ours already, and it was meant to be." Answer 10. That my great-grandparents on my dad's side were straight up kidnapped from a reservation in North Dakota when they were little kids. Turns out my great-grandparents on mom's side were also yoked from their families by the church. IDK, we never found out who stole them as kids, but we did find my extended family. The Sioux are pretty base too. Apparently I'm Sioux. Didn't find this out until like 2018 or so. Just thought I was dark white dude LMAO. Answer 11. Not as scandalous as some of the stories here, but was a big shock to us. My brother did 23 and me 3 years ago, and randomly got a match to an aunt we had no idea existed. My brother asked who her parents were, but she was adopted in a very closed adoption. 23 and me narrowed down that she was a paternal aunt. My dad's dad was a POS wife-beater who abandoned them when my dad was little. My grandma is dead. This surprise aunt was born the same year as my uncle, so we knew an affair must have occurred. My dad took a 23 and me test and verified she is his half-sister. But he also got in touch with another family member he lost touch with, a cousin on his dad's side. The cousin tells my dad that his father is dead, and when my dad tells the cousin he has a secret half-sister, the cousin says her uncle would never cheat on his wife and he was an amazing guy. Yeah, right, he brutalized my grandma. My new aunt got a hold of her adoption paperwork and her bio mom remained anonymous, but paperwork said she was very young and that the father of her child was a married man with a pregnant wife, an alcoholic, violent, and she was scared of him. So she chose to give my aunt up for adoption and never tell the father for her safety. My aunt is still looking for her bio mother. Answer 12. That my dad isn't my biological dad. My mom was born and raised in Oklahoma, and my dad was born and raised in Michigan. I currently live in Michigan, so I was anticipating seeing at least half my relatives on the DNA website from there. Nope. Everyone was from Oklahoma or Texas. Turns out my dad didn't come into my life until I was 2 years old. Moved me from Oklahoma to Michigan, where all of his family, now my family, obviously knew I wasn't his, including my older 2 brothers and sister, and kept the secret until I found out from Ancestry 30 years later. Before I confronted my parents, I actually tracked down who my biological dad was. He had no idea about me, but did remember my mom. He was a regular customer at her bar. Last year I actually got to meet him, my biological grandpa, which was so cool because I thought all my grandparents were dead, all my aunts and uncles. It turns out I also have a younger sister, but I didn't get to meet her because she was feeling very anxious about it. Answer 13. A few years ago, when I was 33, I found out that my dad isn't my biological father. I took the test, and when the results were ready, I opened the 23andMe app and noticed that I had 3 half-brothers that I was completely unaware of previously. I was in shock, and my mind was racing with the possibilities. Did my dad cheat on my mom? Did my mom cheat on my dad and have children before me and my sister and give them up for adoption? I reached out to all of them with some basic info about me and asked if they have any idea on why we are half-brothers. They were all born near where I was, and 2 of them still lived around there. My family moved states when I was 8. One of them, we'll call him Greg, told me that his mom had recently told him that she used donor sperm to get pregnant, and that's why he did the DNA testing. Another one, we'll call him Adam, said that he was certain his dad was his biological father, but he passed away last year and he didn't want to ask his mom about it as she was still grieving. He said it was possible his dad had donated sperm, but he wasn't sure. He sent me some pictures and I don't look anything like his dad, but to be fair, I think I got most of my genes from my mom's side, as I have a picture of my grandpa from his 20s. And we look almost identical. So much so that when a girlfriend of mine saw it on my phone, she asked if I ran a photo of me through an antiquing filter. But Adam and I did look very similar when we were young kids. The third half-brother, we'll call Dave, didn't really know anything and said he doesn't speak with his parents. At this point, I was hoping Greg was right and that my parents just used donor sperm instead of any infidelity. But my mind was still racing and wondering. I talked some more with Greg and Adam, but mostly just getting to know them and no pertinent info. Then, about a week after I first found all this out, Greg messaged me that he also did the Ancestry.com DNA test and told me he had 5 more half-brothers on there. So now I'm pretty sure my mom used donor sperm, unless my dad was just dropping loads all over town, LOL. I told my sister and she did a test too. Sure enough, we were only half-siblings and she had 4 half-sisters she matched with. We both thought it was weird that all our half-siblings are of the same sex. My sister ended up telling my parents and I found this out because I got a call from my dad asking if he and my mom could come over to talk about something. They came over, and my dad told me that he had a traumatic groin injury in his late teens that affected his testicles and sperm generation. He was told it was unlikely he would be able to impregnate my mom, but they still tried for a couple of years. When it didn't happen, they decided to choose a sperm donor and to be artificially inseminated. They had my sister, and a few years later did the same to have me. I was fine with it all and wasn't mad or upset at all. But my mom was very upset and told me how they had gone back and forth over the years on whether they should tell me and my sister and how it was such a hard thing to decide. She had all the paperwork with her to give to me. The donor was anonymous. All they knew was basic things like age, family medical history, and that he was a medical student doing his residency in the same hospital system they went through for all this. But my mom said that there were private investigators that specialize in finding bio parents from closed sperm donations and that they would pay for it if I wanted to do that. I could tell my dad was a little anxious about the whole situation, and he's a man that is never anxious. My sister has met 2 of her half-sisters, and I'm planning on meeting Greg soon. The similarities between my sister and the half-sisters she has met are insane. The next closest relatives I matched with, that would be on my biological dad's side, are second cousins. I've reached out to all of them with all the pertinent info about my birth and info I have on my bio dad, in hopes one of them might have info for me. But I didn't hear back from any of them. I might do the PI to find my bio dad sometime in the future, but for now, I'm fine. After thinking about it for a while, I realized that my parents wanted me so bad that they went to all the trouble and expense of donor sperm and artificial insemination. So more wanted than a lot of babies. Father's Day wasn't too long after that, and I wrote something to the effect of how my dad is my real, and I'll never think of him as anything else. When he read it, I could see him getting emotional, which is something I've only seen from him a few times in my life. Answer 14. My mom found out that her dad wasn't her bio dad, and it explained a lot. Funny that my grandmother was super religious, no cards allowed in her house, but when her non-bio dad worked for an older man, they lived just down the street from each other. My mom did a DNA test that popped up several half-siblings, and her older sister remembered that last name from when they were kids and living down the street from them. And that's how they made the connection. She reached out to her newfound half-siblings, and they confirmed their dad was her non-bio dad's boss, and that boss's son was her bio dad. The dark side is her non-bio dad always treated her so badly, yelled at her at 1 a.m. for not doing dishes when her siblings didn't have to do dishes at all or get yelled at. When she was 15, he kicked her until she was under the kitchen table and later peed blood. She married my dad shortly after turning 16 to get away from it, and they were married for 25 years, having me and my 4 siblings, and despite the trauma and stunted emotional maturity, cared for and loved us deeply, even if they weren't perfect. By the time she found out her bio dad had passed, her non-bio dad, whom she knew as dad, had passed, and her mom, my grandmother, had dementia. and was in no state to talk about any of this. But it makes me angry that my grandmother never stuck up for my mom, that she didn't protect her from my non-bio grandfather. It's obvious to us now that my mom, the youngest, wasn't supposed to be, and they knew the whole time. It definitely fundamentally alters how I think about my grandfather and grandmother now. I mean, even me, I always felt like my cousins got tons of lap time and loving from my grandfather. Yet one time I criticized or did something to them, who knows what, and he stabbed me in the neck with a plastic fork, but fortunately it broke. He made me apologize to light fixtures for leaving them on. Nobody else had to. And it was my grandmother who carried me on trips and to baseball games, never him. My mom is very close with her oldest sister, and they know all of this, and that is a great relationship. Her other two half-siblings deny she was ever abused, and would never accept they're super religious. Mom would have an illegitimate child. Ironically, in some of her final dementia-ridden days, my grandmother would exclaim, "Why would mom's non-bio dad leave me?" And my aunts, uncles, cousins would be like, "What is she talking about? He's been dead 10 years. While me, my mom, my siblings, and my aunt, her oldest sister, knew exactly what she was talking about, but my mom never said a word. It's my mom's news to tell, and she chooses to say nothing, and that's her choice, which we all respect. She now has a very good relationship with the half-siblings she met through 23, and me, and sits on her porch most nights talking to them. And that's super good. Makes my heart happy. Answer 15. Back in the late 1950s or early 1960s, my great-aunt moved away to another state with her husband and had a few children with him there. While still living there, she wrote home to say that her 2-year-old son had passed away from meningitis or something along those lines. She eventually moved back with her surviving children and carried on with her life. Decades later, long after she was dead, I was contacted by C.C. Moore, an investigative genealogist who was working a cold case, trying to identify a toddler whose body had been pulled from a reservoir by a local fisherman back in the 60s. Turned out to be my aunt's child. His body had been wrapped in a quilt and weighted down so it wouldn't surface. Unlikely that he died from meningitis.
That was enough for today, Cosmonaut. I'll wait for you in the next travel.